So I have long complained about my internet connection here in Australia. So for those watching outside of Australia, I know I have, a fairly diverse audience globally. So in Australia, we have a broadband network called the National Broadband Network, and it was originally proposed back in 2007 under the Rudd government at the time. And the proposal was to roll fiber optic cable out to as many houses as possible. Now, obviously, Australia is a very geographically diverse continent. We have people living, on farms that are bigger than some countries in the EU, for example. So it's hard to get fiber optic cables to literally everyone, but we do have fairly concentrated population centers on the eastern seaboard, and like in areas like Perth, for example. So it is conceivable that you could connect large portions of our population with fiber optic cable. But what ended up happening was that that project got politicized, and the incoming government, who was a conservative government, was like, "Hey, it's way too expensive. No one needs internet faster than 25 megabits per second anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to buy up all of the coax networks that exist. We're going to buy up all of the copper networks that exist from companies like Telstra, for example, and we're going to retrofit it into this new system." So they were focusing on like a multi-technology mix where they would use DOCSIS for the existing cable networks. They roll out fiber to nodes and then use the existing copper infrastructure, so fiber to the node, as we have in a lot of places around the world. And all of the fiber connections for people, they're all GPON, so no one gets dedicated fiber to their house. So you're still limited by the bottleneck that GPON provides, even if we all did get fiber. But a lot of people didn't get fiber. It became like this um, internet lottery around Australia where one side of the street would get fiber to the premises and the other side of the street would have fiber to the node, and it created a disparity in property prices. It, artificially impacted certain communities more than others. Um, because we started out with the original plan of rolling fiber to everyone, and that's how the project was built initially and started out. So some houses were already underway and getting that build, and then the new incoming government came and they wanted to do this mixed technology, so they changed the plan halfway through. So what we ended up with today, if you fast forward from 2007 to 2024, is that we have this situation where that incoming government was in power for 8 years. They brought enough copper to circumnavigate the earth twice. And now they're replacing old copper with new copper. And it became pretty apparent that that wasn't going to work during COVID, for example, when everyone was sent home. And now there was tremendous strain put on this network that was built of these hodgepodge technologies. So they started a new scheme of upgrading all of the copper premises to fiber to the premise. Now, obviously, that makes it drastically more expensive because we started out with a plan and then we changed the plan and we brought all the things we needed to change the plan and then we changed the plan back. So we had, these exponential expenses at each stage of this transition. If for anyone who's ever done any project ever, you know that if you change the plan halfway through, your costs don't just go up a step, they go up fairly drastically. So it's very disappointing. We bought a house in 2020 and moved to where we are today, and that house is connected to the fiber to the node footprint. And my speeds, like they report that I can get around 40 megabits per second, and sometimes I do on a bright sunny day. But if it rains, if there's like wind, if there's more people at home, my average speeds are closer to 30, sometimes high 20s. So this has been an immense source of frustration for me for many years. And Starlink had a $1 trial for the month. So you pay $1 for the hardware instead of the $500, and you pay the monthly fee of $139 a month. And they send you Starlink and you can try it out. So for me, I always thought that Starlink probably wouldn't work here because I've got up on my roof, I've used the app, I've scanned the sky, and it's always been between like 10 at best and 18 at worst percent obstruction. And from the internet forums, everyone said, like, you need crystal clear sky, it's not going to work, you have interruptions, it'll drop out all the time, etc., etc. But I thought with a $1 trial, it's basically a no-brainer just to give it a shot. So I ordered Starlink, and it got delivered in, like, I think it was 4 days. So I put the order in, and then within 4 days I had all of the equipment here. So the dish arrived fairly quickly. I jumped up on the roof. I gave the sky another quick scan and found where I thought would be an okay spot. I chucked the dish down, threw the cable off the side. Behind me is my garage, and there's room above the roller door of the garage to run a cable. So I ran the cable through there, and it's all plugged into my garage at the moment. And I just connected to it and thought, we'll see how things go. So to begin with, it wasn't aligned at all. It was pointing basically 45 degrees off of where it needed to be. And it was reporting it was really obstructed. And I was getting speeds between 30 megabit per second at the low end and 180 megabit per second at the high end, but with regular interruptions. Like every couple of minutes, this thing was dropping out. So the next day, because it arrived late in the afternoon, so the next day I jumped back up there again and I moved it, and I put just a piece of timber up there for it to sit on and try and align it a bit better. So I aligned it as per the app, and I powered it back up. And then the app still reported that it was obstructed, but it actually takes a little bit of time to repopulate. So over the next 24 hours, it was still building that obstruction graph that I'll insert a shot of here. So I made sure it was aligned, and over the next 24 hours, it rebuilt its obstruction graph, and it stopped reporting that it was obstructed. So the main screen, when you open the app, instead of having a red line to the satellites, it was now white. It was saying it wasn't obstructed. But in the outages, I went to the statistics and checked the outages. It was still having fairly frequent outages. The main issue that I was seeing, though, wasn't in like any usability issue. I probably wouldn't have noticed that there was outages, except for when I tried to download a really big file. Like I tried to download Kinewatt, for example, and that started out and said, hey, this will be done in 8 minutes. And then within 2 minutes, it was like, this will be done in 4 hours and 45 minutes. So it was pretty drastically varying in how long it said it was going to take to download that file. And even at 30 megabits per second, 4 hours is fairly dramatic for the ISO for Kinewatt. So I think that might have had to do with the TCP windowing and how that works, how it was, originally maybe it could get 200 megabits per second, so it would scale the TCP windows up to a size that would support a 200 megabit per second connection, but then it would drop down to 30. So, TCP windowing would have to start again once it realized that it couldn't send those large packets anymore. So if it's constantly doing that and we never get beyond a certain window size, for any period of time, I think that might be what was causing the issues with those download times. Sometimes it would pause entirely, but videos would keep streaming. I've got Cubo AI as a baby monitor, so that's a cloud-based thing. You have an app on your phone. It didn't drop out, didn't miss a beat at all the whole time. So it's not like the obstruction is causing full outages. It's just causing issues with connectivity, I think, due to the fluctuations in those speeds. But yeah, over like the next 48 hours, we went away for the weekend, and when we come back, I actually haven't been able to reproduce that download issue. The app is still saying it's not obstructed. My outages seem to be less. I've been on multiple meetings now. Everyone has reported that the audio is fine, the video is fine. So I think it might actually be a solution. So that's probably enough talking. I'm more of a technical person, so let's take a look at how I have set Starlink up and some of the frustrations that I faced in doing that. So this is my Unify topology map. So what we can see here is I've plugged the Starlink router into my 8-port switch, so that's in the garage behind me. Now on that port I've plugged it into, I've set that to VLAN 3. And then on my PFSense, I have created an interface for Starlink. It's just getting a DHCP address. So this is on VLAN 3 as well. So what we do is the router sends out a DHCP request on VLAN 3. The only other thing on VLAN 3 is the Starlink router. So it gets the DHCP address from the Starlink router. So that comes up on a 192.168.1.1 network, which was really annoying because that just so happened to be the same subnet that I was using for my network. So you can't change that. Whatever. So it's impossible to change that subnet. So I had to live with that, which meant that I needed to resubnet my LAN into a different subnet. So that was a frustrating thing that I had to deal with initially, but it was important for me to have that connectivity into my network so that I can use my own Wi-Fi access points that I have around the house, my own networking infrastructure, and be able to access all my VLANs, etc. So that was the first annoyance that I really had with it. My speeds, though, to begin with, were straight away were really good and really consistent. There was fluctuations from that 150 down to 30 from time to time, but once I had realigned it, it was fairly consistent after that. So if we look, for example, okay, so if we execute a speed test, so I need to do that from within my work pod. So we execute a speed test there. So we can see that I'm testing from Starlink. So there's my IP address on the Starlink network. We'll see what the speeds are like. So you can see 37 milliseconds of latency, and I'm at 66.68 megabits per second. So that's already twice as good as what I was getting on the national broadband network. And you can see on the app, I'll put some screenshots here, there is still obstructions, although it's saying it's not obstructed. There is obstructions, and I could make it better. So what I've done is I've ordered the ridge mount, roof mount from Starlink, and I'm hoping that that little bit of elevation I can give it might push it a little bit higher and lower those obstructions down in its field of view, and hopefully reduce some of the obstructions that it's getting. So you can see there a fluctuation. We've gone down to 48.5 megabits per second. And we'll do it again. So keeping in mind, I am testing from a container running in my single node OpenShift, although it is cabled into the network. So it's probably a better test than doing it from my laptop, for example, where I'm connecting over Wi-Fi. I mean, I've done this and I've got 200 megabits per second. So there's pretty wild fluctuations, but you can see, we're on the way back up there now, 62 megabits. So we'll see if we can get a good one for the video. So we can see our latencies come down there again. So obviously as these satellites move across the sky and they get further away from the trees, I get better connectivity, and then worse when they're near the trees. That's 186 megabits per second. So that's one of the better ones I've seen, up closer to 200. So I think I will probably disconnect my NBN connection, and I'll probably live with this because it has improved my meetings. As for example, when I was having my one-on-one meetings with my manager, it was just me and him on a call. My NBN connection would drop out fairly frequently. Sometimes I couldn't hear what he said. I would have to turn my video resolution down, turn his video resolution down in Google Meet so they're both 360p. And if I joined a meeting with more than 2 or 3 people in it, I had to completely disable my video and set Google Meet to only send one video feed at a time. So I would only see the person who was talking. And if there was a screen share, I would only see the screen share and not the person who's talking. Whereas I'm able to join meetings now with multiple people in them, have all the video feeds just like you would in any 2024 civilized society. So I feel like this is the solution to my problems. It's obviously a drastically more expensive solution. I'm paying $85 a month now for the NBN connection. This is $139 per month. But if I can eliminate some of these obstructions that I have at the moment and try and get a bit more consistency with this speed, it's already multiple times better than the NBN connection. So it's probably worth that extra price increase. We are in autumn here, so fall. So some of the trees are starting to thin out a little bit. It'll be interesting to see in summer when they're back in their full density, whether I'm getting more obstructions. That'll be something we need to wait and see. But that's My experience with Starlink so far, really, really positive. Even with the obstructions, I can't believe that it's doing as well as it does. I can't believe that I basically use the internet and don't notice that I'm using Starlink. In most cases, it is faster. Probably a little bit of delay when I'm talking to people on a meeting. Like there's always that little bit of delay, and you feel like you're cutting someone off or they're cutting you off. That probably happens a little bit more with 43 milliseconds of latency compared to the 10 to 20 milliseconds I was seeing with NBN. But small price to pay for being able to actually see people's webcams and people not looking at me like I'm a potato. So that's all I've got. If you have any questions about my experience with Starlink, I'm happy to answer them. Any technical questions, I'm happy to dive more into Starlink, obviously, and see what we can unpick about it. But yeah, I will provide updates as I learn more. Thanks for watching.